Now, with all the very latest from around the world and here at home, it's the ITV News at 10.
It could not have been clearer. The second Trump term feels already so very different from the first. As one of our Republican analysts put it today, MAGA has gone mainstream.
The office of President of the United States.
In his speech, Mr. Trump referenced the attempt to assassinate him. He had been saved by God, he said, to make America great again.
The golden age of America begins right now. From this moment on, America's decline is over.
This was a display of raw power. It wasn't just about Mr. Trump returning to the most consequential office on the planet. It was the titans of the information world he gathered around him. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, even the CEO of recently banned TikTok. The message, pay homage and be welcomed in. Defy me and you may pay the price. Tonight we await the start of a news tsunami. The 47th president is preparing to sign a blizzard of executive orders. Amongst them, the declaration of a state of emergency on America's southern border. He has ordered troops to deploy to defend it and promised to deport millions of people. Back home, as the teenager who killed 3 schoolgirls at a dance class in Southport pleads guilty, the Prime Minister says there are questions to be answered.
It is clear that this was a young man with a sickening and sustained interest in death and violence. He has shown no signs of remorse.
And the Trump faithful on what they hope and expect from his return to the White House.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby in Washington.
Good evening and welcome to Washington on this cold, clear night where it is hard to capture just how different Donald Trump's second inauguration was from his first 8 years ago. Then his opponents and much of the rest of the world seemed to feel America had made a terrible mistake it would soon wake up from. This time, MAGA truly has gone mainstream and Donald Trump appeared all-powerful. The tech and information titans of the modern age all assembled around him to display their loyalty, much as in a medieval court. The event itself took place indoors because of the bitterly cold weather. His inaugural speech was both a vigorous statement of intent and a thinly veiled attack on the presidency of his predecessor, Joe Biden, who could do nothing except look on. America said Mr. Trump would now be entering a new golden age. He himself had been saved by God from the assassin's bullet, he claimed, for the purpose of making America great again. And top of his agenda is migration. As his first act, he declared a national emergency on America's southern border and said millions upon millions of what he called criminal aliens would be returned to where they came from.
There is a certain civility and cruelty about the way America hands over power. Face to face with rigid smiles, an image of unity and continuity as the incoming and outgoing presidents take tea together at the White House, however awkward. Except, of course, Donald Trump denied Joe Biden this courtesy 4 years ago. In a further symbol of the peaceful transfer of power, this time both presidents went together to the Capitol in the armoured car known as the Beast. The streets hardly packed with well-wishers. The authorities said the cold weather had forced them to change plans, telling people not to congregate in the city. The small talk as they arrived was inaudible, but the body language was clear.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you.
Joe Biden followed by the woman who lost the election after his last-minute withdrawal. Here too, presidents past, the Clintons arriving in silence. and Barack Obama arriving alone.
Attention!
And former Vice President Mike Pence, who fled for his life from this building 4 years ago as a pro-Trump mob stormed it. Among the select few invited to watch inside the Capitol, Boris Johnson, rubbing shoulders with tech billionaires and powerful US politicians. And at the apex of it all, the Trump family.
The Honorable Donald John Trump.
236 years after George Washington became the first, the nation again bestowed its trust in one man. His arrival sealed by an air kiss with Melania and a handshake with the man he'd beaten was topped off by a spontaneous outbreak of patriotism. But some will remember this moment as the first time in US history a convicted felon prepared to take the oath of office.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
Timing slipped, meaning when the moment came, the 47th president wasn't sworn in at the symbolic time of 11:47.
That I will faithfully execute
The office of President of the United States.
But 14 minutes later. And although Melania held a Bible given to Donald Trump by his mother and another used by Abraham Lincoln, he admitted to place his hand on either as he repeated the promises read by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
His speech opened with a bright vision for the future.
The golden age of America begins right now.
But then he lambasted the record of the previous administration.
For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair.
And implied a divine intervention had spared him from an assassination attempt.
I was saved by God to make America great again.
His policy priorities were clear.
First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. Today, I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars.
As the formalities ended, Joe Biden was bidding farewell not just to his successor, but to 5 decades of public service. Donald Trump wasted no time wielding his power. With the stroke of a Sharpie, the mourning period for the late President Jimmy Carter was over.
Flags shall be flown at full mast. Very important.
Trump's wish was their command. Tonight, in an arena in front of 20,000, Elon Musk was the president's warm-up act, saluting the faithful in a gesture which drew an intake of breath from some. Donald Trump's ceremonial formalities were completed with a review of troops inside the Capitol. There were echoes of America's past struggle for freedom, watched by a president who may reshape its place in the world. For some, this is the start of a brave new era of radical reform. But for many others, this is a bleak moment for America. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Washington.
Well, the impact of President Trump's words is no doubt already being felt in the makeshift camps of would-be migrants near the Mexican border wall and in the small settlements that dot the bleak and unforgiving landscape on both sides of the border. We've been talking to some of those for whom the American dream is tonight hanging by a thread.
In a desolate corner of the Arizona desert, Where Mexico ends and America begins, dozens of migrants are huddled around a campfire. Among them, families with babies and young children. It is this issue of immigration that helped Donald Trump into power, and why today he declared it a national emergency. Here, we meet a woman who's paid thousands of dollars to be smuggled across from Mexico, fleeing poverty and violence. There's a lot of crime and they threaten to kill me, she told me. There are many things that are very ugly and very sad. There are many who disappear. And the dream of America is drawing migrants from across the world here, including this family from India who've been travelling for 6 months. All of them here say they want to ask for asylum. As the day dawns, Border Patrol agents arrive. But the new president is now preparing to send US troops to the border to ramp up his crackdown. After a head count, agents take them away to be processed. This wall, though, has two faces. In the US, it's widely seen as a monument to a failing immigration system. But in Mexico, the wall is the last hurdle on the journey to opportunity. Lunchtime in the border city of Nogales, and we meet dozens of migrants who'd been bussed back that morning to Mexico. Many told us neither the wall, the perilous journey, or President Trump's policies will deter them from crossing again.
They could scale that wall and be on the other side in less than 30 seconds.
In the US, all the talk is how to stop them. Art Del Cueto is a senior Border Patrol official who believes Donald Trump is the answer. So what do you think about Donald Trump? What do you think of his policy on immigration?
I've been on the campaign trail with Donald Trump. I spoke at several of his rallies. Policies is the big thing. So you can continue to say, you know, the wall's there, that's a deterrent. But if there's no consequence for your action, you're not going to stop the action.
But his hopes and President Trump's declaration of mass deportation today strike fear in the hearts of this family. It could mean they're separated. Karen and her parents are undocumented migrants, her brothers US citizens, and their American dream is now hanging in the balance.
I'm anxious and I have fear, but I'm trying to also stay calm and hope for the best. During Trump's first term, my dad was actually placed in removal proceedings for a minor traffic violation. So really anything can put us at risk now.
The wall is an imposing obstacle, but it's been far from insurmountable. The question is, will President Trump's tough immigration policy now deter the determined? Sejal Karia, News at 10, Arizona.
And Sejal joins me now. Sejal, we're expecting Donald Trump to begin signing executive orders tonight on this issue. How easy will it be for him, do you think, to enact them and, frankly, to deliver on what he's promised?
Well, some of his policies, Tom, have already come into effect today. Dozens of migrants who are lining up on the Mexican side of the border, waiting to claim asylum, have had their immigration appointments cancelled today. Some had been waiting for months. Many have been left in tears. But not all of his policies are going to be as easy to implement. They're going to be pretty difficult, to say the least. For example, by declaring a national emergency on the border, it allows him to deploy US troops to try and seal the border. Now, he may be able to do that on certain parts of it, but not all of it. The border stretches for 2,000 miles, and so much of it is completely inaccessible. Also, carrying out mass deportations is not going to be easy. A lot of this is going to be subject to logistical and financial challenges, not to mention legal ones. A lot of these plans could be tied up in the court system for many years to come. What this is really about is about appealing to his base, supporters who believe that he is the man who can crack down on immigration and a system that is failing in their eyes.
OK, Sejal, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's come here now in the studio to Robert, with all his wealth of experience of dealing with Trump and all his, I mean, wow, where would we begin today? What a day in so many ways, really, in almost every way. It felt remarkable to be here. I guess one of the things one would focus in on this, that really felt like not just an inauguration, raw display of power, no?
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the imagery, the tone, the feel was so different than it was 8 years ago. I mean, first of all, that extraordinary moment when Trump was eviscerating in front of both Harris and Biden, the kind of agenda and legacy that they have left behind. It was like a kind of a ritual humiliation for Democrats. And then as we've been reporting, you know, it really feels like MAGA has now got swagger, that their worldview has been sort of vindicated and validated. And perhaps the most extraordinary image of all, were, as you pointed out, was all these sort of tech titans surrounding Donald Trump. This is kind of corporate America now bowing before the new king. And it really had that feel to it as being an extraordinary power play. And much of it is, in a way, sort of amplified by the fact there is no meaningful sort of opposition or resistance. I mean, the Democrats, you know, have lost control of the White House, the House of Representatives, the Senate. There's a conservative majority in the Supreme Court. They have no message and no messenger. So, you know, if Donald Trump is looking out tonight, as perhaps he will from the Truman balcony and looking at the sweeping views of the National Mall, he really is master of all he surveys.
Well, we expect him to start signing executive orders very soon, a blizzard of them. I mean, paint a picture of what you think that's going to be like. What will he focus on, and how quickly will it be implemented?
Well, I think, you know, he wants to sort of adopt a policy of you know, from the military, of shock and awe, if you like. So we're talking about potentially 100, maybe 150 executive orders being signed over the next 24 hours. A lot of that's going to be sort of stuff over immigration that Sedgwick was reporting on. Some of it's about unleashing the great sort of American energy revolution, opening up Alaska to drilling, you know, that phrase of his, you know, drill, baby, drill. All of that is going to be part of it, potentially, almost certainly pardoning or commuting the sentences of the January the 6th prisoners as well. So it's going to be sort of Trump unleashed, if you like. And that's why perhaps the most memorable phrase of all that he said at this inaugural address was that one where he said, you know, God has given me a second chance to make America great again.
Robert, it's going to be fascinating. Thank you very much indeed. So that leads to perhaps an obvious question. What is the rest of the world making of that assertive speech by the new president and the raw display of power that Robert and I have just been talking about? Well, we'll discuss that with Debbie in Beijing, Robert in Downing Street. And first, let's go to Emma in Kyiv. I mean, Emma, so much at stake for everyone watching this in Ukraine. I guess the phrase that stuck out, easier said than done, I suppose, is the phrase one would focus on when it comes to that. What do you think people there made of what they saw today?
Well, I think there was a degree of disappointment that Ukraine wasn't actually mentioned by name, and I think there had been hope that they might get some sense of clarity as to how Donald Trump saw the situation in this country and how he saw the war going forward. Of course, over the past few months, they've heard a lot of rhetoric from him, most notably when he said he would have this war at an end by day one. Well, that's certainly not the case. And for the last half an hour, people here in Kyiv and across this country have been under a risk of significant air attack and have been told to go to shelters. Now, they're getting used to that here because it's been the way it's been for so long, but they're also getting incredibly tired of it. And when we've spoken to people over the past few days, there has been a sense that they really do want to see some kind of move towards peace. They would like to see talks go ahead. They would like to try and find a way forward for this country that doesn't involve war, but does include the long-term protection and security that they have fought this war for. They do want peace, but they don't want it at any price, and they feel they've made huge sacrifices. So they're hoping that the input of the Trump administration may change things. And tonight, President Zelensky has been posting on social media, welcoming the new president to his role and urging him to work towards peace.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's move on to Debbie in Beijing. I mean, Debbie, really so many conflicting signals. It was reported President Xi was invited to the inauguration. I don't know if that was true. What was true is we saw the CEO of TikTok, which of course has just been banned here, right next to the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, today. And yet there was Mr. Trump saying he's going to take over the Panama Canal and get rid of Chinese influence. So what's been the reaction to all of that?
Well, Tom, I think President Xi Jinping will be quite surprised to wake up and find out that he is in control of the Panama Canal. Quite a surprise for Panama too. There's been no reaction from the Chinese government so far given the hour, but President Xi will be receiving a first-hand account of the inauguration from his vice president. This was the first time that a senior Chinese government official attended an American inauguration, and Xi Jinping will want to know what Han Zheng saw and heard behind the scenes at Capitol Hill. It was, as you say, no surprise to see the CEO of TikTok in attendance, given the company was given a reprieve by President Trump. It was incidentally Donald Trump that first raised security concerns about TikTok during his first term, but following a phone call with President Xi on Friday, he has moved to block the ban and find a way for TikTok to operate in the US. Tom, I think that China-US relations are going to be steered from the very top. There is talk of President Trump coming here in his first 100 days, but I remember back in 2017, during the first year of his first term, we saw President Xi go to Mar-a-Lago and Donald Trump come here and tour the Forbidden City. Then just a matter of months later, he launched a trade war. So while the Communist Party does appear to welcome the return of the deal maker in chief, the watchword is still proceed with caution.
Okay, Debbie, thank you very much. Well, let's go finally to Robert, who is in Downing Street. Robert, so many tricky things for Keir Starmer to manage, really. Where the mood music from here we're hearing seems to be that Peter Mandelson might not be confirmed as the ambassador. Let's wait and see about that, but that would certainly be very tricky. How does Keir Starmer handle all this?
I mean, certainly just on Mandelson, as I said earlier this evening, tremendous nervousness in Downing Street behind me. They're still hoping that it wasn't a necessary decision to appoint Peter Mandelson. The existing ambassador, Karen Pierce, has a very good relationship with Trump, and therefore if the Trump team were to block Mandelson, and as I say, they are fearful of that in Downing Street, that would be a terrible humiliation for Keir Starmer. More than that, this is was just confirmed in that extraordinary speech given by Donald Trump just how difficult managing this relationship for Keir Starmer will be. You know, when I've spoken to the Prime Minister about this, he always insists that there are sort of institutional links, you know, beneath the political level that will keep the relationship decent. In particular, our security services get on very well with each other. But Trump has placed so many of his maverick sort of colleagues in these positions of authority that, truthfully, the relationship is going to come under strain. One of the, I suppose, things that Downing Street will be slightly relieved about is we haven't yet got a timetable from Trump on imposing taxes on our exports, taxes on exports of all foreign countries, those tariffs that are going to be so controversial. But it's been confirmed tonight from the White House that America is again pulling out of that international Paris Agreement to combat climate change. That is absolutely antithetical to everything Keir Starmer believes in. Who knows quite what Trump means when he says he's going to take control of the Panama Canal, but that sounds like an almost sort of Putin-esque threat of the sort that Starmer just couldn't, in any sense, condone. So although Starmer continues to talk about the importance of maintaining the famous special relationship between Britain and America that started just after the Second World War, started sort of during the Second World War, it's going to be, frankly, one of the sort of greatest challenges of what has already been a very challenging time for the Prime Minister.
Okay, Robert, thank you very much indeed. Well, away from the inauguration of President Trump now, and in the UK, one of the most distressing and, I guess, consequential criminal cases of recent years came to an abrupt end today. On the first day of his trial, Axel Ruda-Cubana unexpectedly pleaded guilty to murdering 3 little girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport. A crime awful enough in itself, but which was also followed, as you will all recall, by a summer of rioting across the country. Ruda-Cubana also admitted producing the biological toxin ricin. Today's sudden change of plea by the 18-year-old defendant took everyone by surprise.
Innocence etched across their faces, the 3 child victims of these barbaric killings. Less than an hour before he executed his murderous plan, their killer, Axel Rudakabana, paces outside his home, waiting for a taxi to take him on the short journey to Southport. As he waited, 26 young girls, including Alice, Bibi and Elsie, had just joined a Taylor Swift-themed dance class, about to be exposed to violence no one should ever see. Within seconds of entering the hall, Axel Rudakabana stabbed the 3 girls and 8 other children, their dance teacher and a man who tried to intervene. Today, after months of silence, he admitted all charges against him. Outside court, the Crown Prosecution Service shared their thoughts on Rudakabana.
It is clear that this was a young man with a sickening and sustained interest in death and violence. He has shown no signs of remorse.
Earlier, the teenager had been driven from his prison cell into Liverpool Crown Court. This was supposed to be the start of Axel Rudakabana's trial, but in court, to everyone's surprise, he changed his pleas. 16 times he mumbled guilty as the indictment of murder, attempted murder and 3 other charges were read to him. For 14 horrifying minutes, Rudakabana brought terror to this quiet area of Southport. As children fled, neighbours rushed to offer shelter.
What else would I have done? Say, no, you go away. You see kids screaming, covered in blood. And like I say, my heart goes out to the 3 families who lost the children on that day. I just hope things get better for them somehow. How, I don't know.
They have been spared a trial, but the families of these 3 children have been robbed of so much. Alice's parents said she was their perfect dream child, born and raised into love. Bibi was full of joy, a sweet, kind, spirited girl, adored by her family. And Elsie had the ability to light up any room, her parents saying she was truly unforgettable. In their final moments, they were exposed to the most unimaginable horror. Their families left broken, and we may never know why. Rachel Townsend, News at 10, Liverpool.
Well, tonight the government announced a public inquiry into the Southport murders. Details have emerged about how the killer, Axel Rudakabana, had contact with a variety of authorities and was also referred 3 times to the anti-extremism programme Prevent. Earlier, Sir Keir Starmer had said there are grave questions to answer about how the state failed in its ultimate duty to protect the young girls who became Rudakabana's victims.
Just a few years ago, he looked like an innocent child. Today, there is no mistaking him as a guilty murderer.
It's that time of year again!
How did Axel Rudakabana go from acting for children in need to acting out violence on fellow minors? We now know the CCTV we obtained of him pacing around in the run-up to his killings wasn't the first sign that he was dangerous, according to neighbours who didn't want to be named.
I recognised the purple lanyard of being a Lancashire County Council lanyard, one that would coincide with that a social worker would wear. We did see them outside the house, but they did not enter the house without a police escort. Axel just glared at you, didn't really make comment. If we knew he was a risk, why was there not an intervention put in place to prevent it?
It is a recurring question when you analyse his past. Born in Cardiff to Rwandan parents in 2006, in 2013 Rudakabana moved with his family to the village of Banks in Lancashire and later attended nearby Range High School, where he phoned Childline to say he was being racially bullied. In 2019, he was excluded from school over claims he was carrying a knife, with students telling us he also had a kill list. After being thrown out, he returned to the site and assaulted someone with a hockey stick. He then attended 2 specialist schools where teachers were said to be concerned about his behaviour. Between 2019 and 2021, Ruda was even referred to the Counter-Terrorism Prevent programme 3 times. And a week before carrying out his attack in Southport, he's understood to have booked a taxi back to his former school, but his father stopped him. Ruda violence led to more during last summer's riots, inspired by false claims that he was a Muslim and an asylum seeker. While we know that isn't true, police still don't understand what did motivate his murders, and there are calls to reform the Prevent programme to catch potential killers who have no clear ideology.
What appears in this attack, but in attacks in other countries, that what we are seeing is sort of a mixed ideology or no ideology at all. And that really means we need to review the whole approach to Prevent and bring it really in line with other violence prevention programmes, because it's getting more and more difficult to make that distinction.
What was distinctive about Axel Ruda was his hunger for violence. Could he have been caught before he'd become a killer?
Well, Paul is outside the Home Office for us tonight. Paul, I mean, let's be honest, Sir Keir Starmer is right to say there are a great many questions to be answered here.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. And one Home Office source said to me today there isn't an agency that hasn't failed in this case. The Home Secretary herself, Yvette Cooper, listed some of those agencies in the statement she released tonight announcing this public inquiry. She said the police, the courts, social services, mental health services, the youth justice system had all had contact with Axel Ruda. I think particular criticism, though, will be reserved for the Prevent programme, partly because it is familiar criticism. We've been here before where questions are raised about why people are not caught by the Prevent programme and stopped before they go down the road of mass violence. Part of the answer, as you heard in my report, is because increasingly now it's not clear what a person's ideology is. For example, in prison, about a third of terrorists these days don't have a clear motivation. Nevertheless, tonight this is being politicised once again. Much of what was said online in August last year just wasn't true, but Nigel Farage has been tweeting this evening saying he was at least right in suggesting there was information that hadn't been put out into the public domain. The Home Office says that's because they just didn't want to prejudice the trial, but Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, will make a statement tomorrow morning in Downing Street about all of this, so Number 10 gets the urgency here. And I think the authorities are going to have to get to grips with the fact that in an age when it takes a few seconds to tweet a lie, they do need to get faster at releasing the truth.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed. And let's come back to Washington now. And for tens of thousands of Trump supporters, this was a day of jubilation tinged with disappointment. The cruelly cold weather, which forced the inauguration ceremony to take place indoors, also meant that many Trump fans were not able to cheer their hero into office. This did not, however, deter thousands of them from defying the cold just to be there on the big day.
Queues stretching into the distance from the early hours with no guarantee of seeing the new president in person. Buoyed by Trump anthems, Trump merchandise, and with no shortage of red, white and blue. This jubilant crowd that had carried their hero right back to power today converged on Washington from all over.
I'm from Florida.
East Texas.
California. Tennessee.
Some even travelling from the UK.
Show our support for a real leader.
Many had been waiting ever since President Trump last left the White House for this moment. No limit on what they thought he would now do for them.
Everything. And he's going to come through with all of it. You can bet.
It's not just the weather that makes this very different to 8 years ago. All these supporters who've come from all over the United States are feeling it. Trump is returning emboldened and stronger. His opponents in disarray. He was an outsider then. Now, this feels like Trump's town, Trump's America.
At this party in a Washington restaurant, a partisan crowd watching on big screens cheered the outgoing president and cheered the incoming one's every word.
What did you think watching that?
I was very proud of America.
What would you like to see him prioritize?
Immigration, the border,
Get inflation down, calming the world down from the world wars, and just getting back to normalcy.
Do you have faith that he can deliver?
I do. I saw him deliver.
He made some pretty big promises here today.
He did. Yes, and I believe that he's going to, because I think that there's more faith this time.
Amongst the optimism and the flag waving, we did find a note of caution from this Republican heading to a celebration ball.
I'm a little concerned that he's going to move a little too quickly, and the American people, who by and large support many of the policies of the incoming Trump administration, are concerned about the speed and the vigor in which he is looking to advance them.
But even that was a minority view on the streets of Washington today. The Trump show, with all its shock, awe and unpredictability, is back for season 2, and his supporters could not be more delighted. Romilly Weeks, News at 10, Washington.
And whilst we have been on air, President Trump has arrived at a rally alongside his wife Melania, of course, in front of thousands of his supporters, as you can see. They were congratulated by everyone they met as they came down the steps into the arena. And let's discuss all that with Dan, who's here to give us some final thoughts on what has been quite a day, quite a year, one might say, quite an election. We're waiting this blizzard of executive orders, but we haven't had them yet. When do we get them?
Yeah, so I think we saw him as he entered the Capital One Arena carrying this black folder with a Sharpie. He likes using a Sharpie, we're told, as his pen. So we're expecting him to start signing on the stage. They've got a desk on the stage for him in a kind of great flourish of political theatre for which he is, you know, so well known and so adept. Start signing some of these executive orders. Now, we don't know what order they're going to come in. We don't know which ones will be first, but I think we've been given quite a few clues about the kind of things that are going to come in straight away. For example, renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Well, that's easy. It's a piece of paper. I mean, they can change it on the maps here. It doesn't really require any international treaties. It might annoy the Mexicans slightly. Similarly, you know, renaming this mountain in Alaska from Mount Denali that, you know, was changed by Barack Obama back to Mount McKinley. Again, a fairly easy thing to do. There are harder ones which will arguably not be signed today. And what's interesting is we haven't, for example, had any indication of any tariffs coming in today. Now, that was something that was talked about a lot, 60% tariffs from goods coming in from China. I think the suggestion is now that perhaps there is a slight holding off on that because he wants to negotiate. This is the art of the deal. You threaten, you cajole, and wait for the response of your adversary. So it may be that some of these ones that have been talked about, kicked around in the press in the past few weeks, may take a few more days. But certainly we're told there's going to be up to 100 being signed today, and he'll start, as we can see, he's in the room now, watching the ceremonial band play, and we expect him to get out his famous Sharpie and start signing executive orders right away. The one thing he has signed that was wielding his power immediately, you may have seen in my report, was declaring the kind of mourning for Jimmy Carter over. Flags, as you can see behind us, are now flying at full staff, as they say here. So straight away, a demonstration of immediate presidential power.
One thing we've learned from Donald Trump is he's very unpredictable. But apart from the fact that you'll be lucky to see the inside of your house again for about 6 months, what do you expect from the next few months?
Well, obviously, there's going to be a lot of speculation about foreign policy. We haven't heard much about Ukraine, but he had boasted he was going to bring that conflict to an end within 24 hours. So, you know, let's talk again tomorrow when the war ends.
Right.
Seriously, though, I think there's going to be a renewed effort to try and broker some sort of deal with President Putin. There's clearly going to be a renewed effort to look at the Middle East and closening and re-establishing formal ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That's the kind of work that started with the Abraham Accords in his first administration that I think he feels is unfinished business, maybe, that he wants to accomplish. I think maybe he is gunning for a Nobel Peace Prize. We've talked about this on the podcast, something that Barack Obama achieved that he feels that is possibly in his gift. So lots coming down the track.
OK, Dan, thank you very much indeed. And that is it for tonight. We'll leave you with a couple of the main images of the day. The moment the 45th president of the United States also became the 47th, and the moment when the Trump victory party really began. From a cold and somewhat windy Washington, where whatever else you might think about it, a new era in American politics has begun tonight. Good night, and thank you for watching.
Tomorrow, Denise